Okay, next we're going to talk about door knocking. Now, when we do our seminar, I usually ask the crowd, raise your hand if you still do door knocking. And I get a large percentages that say yes, they do that. And I say, well, congratulations. Let me give you the history of door knocking a little bit in our country. Door knocking was very, should we say, effective and very popular in the late 80s and early 90s. But what happened in the late 80s and early 90s to this country? We went cyber crazy. The internet became a mainstream thing, and everybody realized that they could talk to people and communicate with people almost without ever seeing anybody. And door knocking kind of went down in popularity because we all were using this new medium called the internet when it came to emails and video chat and all this other stuff to communicate with people. So door knocking became very unpopular during that time and has been up until about 2 or 3 years ago. Because what's happened is in our country, we have been cybered out. We have had 20 years now, almost 20 years, or maybe a little bit more than 20 years, of nothing but internet and virtual people. So people are actually craving the interaction of real people in our society these days. And I think this is a very good thing for realtors because many realtors, you know, their best asset is their own personality. So this is a very good thing, I think, for our industry. So what's happening is door knocking is now becoming more popular and more effective than really almost it's ever been. So if you're going to door knock, what I want you to do is make sure you're door knocking in a way that creates the most good or the greatest amount of leads and energy for your business. So let me ask you a question. If I said, okay, folks, give me the top 4 things that a realtor hands to somebody if the door gets answered, what would you say? And by the way, let me tell you something. If you're a female, you have such an advantage because studies have shown that the door gets answered way more often for ladies than it does for men. That's just part of our culture. So it's just kind of a little bonus for you ladies out there. So when the door gets answered, what are the top 4 things that a realtor would hand to a prospective client, aka the homeowner? Number 1 thing, guess what it is? A business card. Number 1 thing that's handed to a homeowner when the door gets answered is a business card. Number 2, what's number 2? Number 2 is actually a list of recently listed and solds in this area. So here's a list of recently solds and listed in this area, and that's actually of somewhat interest to the homeowner because it kind of tells them how much their house is worth. Number 3 is a pen, a little ink pen with your name or brokerage across it. And the 4th is a tie between the magnets for the calendar magnets that go on your refrigerator and those little notepads that have you and your name at the top, and then people can make notes. And by the way, before we get into this too much, do yourself a favor, don't ever buy the magnets again. Here's why. A large percentage and an increasing percentage these days of refrigerators are what? Stainless steel. Guess what? The magnets most of the time don't stick to stainless steel. So those magnets are really becoming kind of a buggy whip because they go right in the trash. So speaking of the trash, let me ask you this. What happens to 90% of all the things that you hand to a homeowner when they close the door? You're right, it goes right in the trash. That's your marketing dollars right in the trash. So let's talk about this when it comes into terms of money. If you were going to give away 1,000 pens, and let's say you decided to door knock 1,000 houses in your hunting area, and we went over that before, your hunting area, and each pen that you bought with your name and brokerage on it cost you 80 cents. By the time you got to 1,000 houses, how much is that program going to cost you? 800 bucks. 80 cents times 1,000 houses is $800. And how long is that pen that's sitting on the counter or somewhere else going to be sticking around? Probably 3-4 months, that's about it. So if they're not listing their house within the next 3 or 4 months, that pen really is going to probably do you no good. Let me ask you this, speaking of the notepads. If you've ever handed out notepads, think about this. I have met dozens of realtors who have said to me that while doing a listing presentation, the client pulled a notepad from another realtor and started taking notes on the listing presentation from another realtor. Now that's funny. So keep that in mind too. Most of the time this stuff goes right in the trash or never gets used. So you got to make sure that if you're going to do door knocking, you're going to make sure you get the best bang for your buck, and that's how we're going to do this. So here's what I want you to do for today. I want you to imagine this scenario. Now, this is a story about myself, actually, years ago, after I graduated from San Diego State University. As at my first house I ever bought down near San Diego State. I was just sitting there one afternoon, watching TV, just doing nothing really, and there was a knock on the door. So I went up to the door and I opened it. There was a very nicely dressed gentleman there. He says, "Hi, my name is Doug." I said, "Hi, Doug, great to see you." And he goes, "I'm a realtor." And I thought to myself, of course you're a realtor. Who else would be dressed like that in this heat, right? He goes, "Well, listen, I'm actually also one of your neighbors. I actually live in this area. I live about 2 blocks down and a couple streets over. So I'm hoping that if you ever want to sell your house here or buy a new house or do anything in real estate, I hope you'll consider using me." And I'm like, "Great, Doug, sounds good." He hands me his business card like I knew he was going to. And I went to close the door. He goes, wait, here, take this." I'm like, "What is this?" Guess what he handed me? He handed me a cardboard canister of Morton salt. The little girl with the umbrella, walking in the rain. Hey, Morton salt. But he had taken the label off the salt and put his own label on it. Had his picture, had his name, had his phone number, had his brokerage all the way around the canister. It's like a big version of his business card. And I'm like, "All right, Doug, thanks. That was strange." I walked into my kitchen, opened the cupboard, put the salt up there, and closed the cupboard. Let me ask you a question. How long have you had your Morton salt container? I mean, most people say, "Oh, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We've had it so long it's like crystallized in there." Here's the thing. Every time I went to that cupboard and opened it, there's Doug, there's his face, there's his name. I couldn't get his face or his name out of my head. I mean, he actually was my neighbor. I'd see him walking his dog up and down my street. I'm like, "Doug, salt guy, how you doing?" Well, guess what? Guess who I listed my house with 3 years later? Doug the salt guy. Because he was so top of mind that when I thought about selling my house, I'm like, "Oh, I know Doug. He lives right here in my neighborhood, and I see him all the time." So, let's go over this a little bit. If you did salt, and this is just one example, we're going to give you several different examples, and you could do anything. If you're going to use salt, for example, then how much is that going to cost you as opposed to the pens? Well, let's go over this. You can go down to Ralph's or Vaughn's or some other grocery store and probably buy canisters of salt for about 59 cents. Now, how much is that program going to cost you? Well, 1,000 times 59, okay, is 590 bucks. You can go down to Costco and get 6 packs of salt for as low as 40 or even 35 cents each. Now, this whole program costs you maybe $400. And I also heard for people that have Winco grocery store near them that you can get Winco to order you a case of salt, which I'm not sure how many that is, but a case of salt for as low as 29 cents each. Wow, that's now less than $300 to really make an impact. So this is just an example. So let's talk about this. If you're going to door knock, do it in the area that you live. The best thing to be able to do is to door knock and really hammer your hunting area because that's where you live and you know that area. Also, the next thing is make sure what you leave them is very memorable and sticks around for years to come. The pen, not memorable at all. Not going to stick around. The notepads, every realtor is giving people notepads. It doesn't stick around, nor is it memorable. Okay? And we already talked about the magnets for the refrigerators. Those don't even work, let alone sticking around. So, with that being said, bad examples. Calendars, notepads, pens, etc. Those are bad examples because that's what every other realtor is doing. If you want the results that every other realtor is getting, do what every other realtor is doing. And that's not what you want to do. Good example, the Morton salt canister. Again, this is just one example. Let's take a look at this. This is an example right here of a Morton salt canister. And just so you know, our graphics guy here at the Career Compass made this label on their computer in about 15 minutes and just slapped it on. Here's a picture of me years ago. Look how happy I am. Anyway, here's what they did. They put American Real Estate and Mortgage, which is just a made-up company. And here's my name. Here's all my accreditations. Look at this. Mention this salt canister and get $1,000 off your transaction when you use American Real Estate. You think you might get some calls on that? Definitely. This label right here, our graphics guy here at the Career Compass made up in about 10 minutes and we slapped it on a Morton salt canister. So this is not a lot of work and it doesn't take a lot of effort. In fact, I've been told that there's an Avery label. You know, the Avery labels that are half sheet. You can just print them and they fit on the Morton salt canisters just perfectly. So there's an even easier way of doing this. Okay, a lot of people say, well, where else could I use this? Well, the obvious place is open houses. Because a lot of times when you walk into an open house, you get a business card from the realtor, you might get a pen, You might get a notepad and you take that stuff and you throw it right in the trash as soon as you get home. But if you're going to get this from that realtor in an open house, they're going to go home and put it in their cupboard, and now you have your face and your information in their cupboard for years to come. So another good place this is open houses. You could probably think of dozens of different places that you could use this. This is just, again, one example. Okay, let's talk about how we could use this to create even more synergy. And by the way, for you pen maniacs, if you're going to do a pen, please do something that's actually very unusual so it sticks around at least a little longer than it normally would. So if you're going to do some pens, do something unusual, something that's kind of classy, that doesn't cost a lot of money, or something that has an extra function or something like that. Okay, and by the way, if you were going to use swag, in other words, what's swag? Swag is stuff you give away. This is not a bad one. Here's one from Lisa Gomez, wonderful lady from Home Smart Real Estate over here in Temecula. And what this is a letter opener, and it has a little slot right here where you can slide your business card in. It's a full-size business card, so it doesn't have to be printed ahead of time. It's just a regular-sized business card. 90% of these are kept because everybody has a home office. They go in, they throw it in their home office drawer, and it's kept for years to come. So that's actually a really good one, and from what I understand, those are not real expensive. Okay, let's talk about the other spectrum of door knocking. Now, we just talked about how we can do it very, very inexpensively, but let's talk about how to really make a huge impact if you're going to go on, maybe say, a little higher end. So, door knocking with a greater cost, but much greater impression. Here is a wine opener from Rob Myers of Windermere Real Estate down in San Diego. And here's what Rob did. Rob created this little baggie here with this wine opener. There's his name, there's his information, there's his logo, and right here is a little card holder that he slides two of his business cards in. Let's look at the other side of this. On the other side, it has a little label on it, and it says, cheers, $500 off your closing cost when Rob Myers manages your next real estate transaction. So there you go. There's a discount on his services to any buyers or sellers. He has a great value, item of value right there, and that gets kept on a regular basis. In fact, this reminds me of a certain gentleman that used something a lot like this. And the gentleman's name is Chad Gibbler. Now, Chad Gibbler is a realtor here in Southern California, and here's what he did. His very first year in real estate, he decides, he goes, you know what? I'm going to make my hunting area this neighborhood right here that has houses from $750,000 to about $1.5 million. And here's what he did. He had little packets like this made up. They were a little different, but he still had the wine opener, is what he used. He used the wine opener, and he had them printed with his information. But before door knocking, what he did is he goes, okay, I'm going to become the quintessential expert on the 300 houses in this gated community that are all from $750,000 to about $1.5 million. So here's what he did. He had 300 of these wine openers made up for this door knocking thing that he was going to do. And here's the key point. He didn't just go and hand them out. Before he did this, he Googled every single individual address in that neighborhood. So with public records being the way they are, he was able to find out when each of the houses was built, any information on the house, any history on the house, who owns the house currently, who used to own it, and all these other things. So he had a one-page sheet of information on each house. So he had 300 pages, and he had a little folder right here. So what he would do, he would take his wine openers, and before he walked up to a house, he would grab his little information sheet, read a little bit about the house, and then put it back and walk up to the door. He would knock on the door, and he would say, hi, my name's Chad Gibbler, and I'm with ABC Real Estate, and I am the expert when it comes to houses in this particular neighborhood. So if you ever want to buy or sell, I'm the guy for you. By the way, here's a little wine opener. And by the way, people who live in really nice houses, do they drink wine? They absolutely do. And that's why he used the wine openers, because he said that he got into 20, 30, sometimes even 40-minute conversations about wine and Napa Valley and all the vacations people have gone on when people answered the door. So not only did he get into these conversations, not only did he give him the wine opener, but he would also say, by the way, Mr. Homeowner, did you know that your house was built in 1956? And in 1971, actually there was a small fire right up there. And you can see where they've kind of rebuilt the new part here. And by the way, have you converted your downstairs bathroom yet? Or something to that effect. So when he walked away from that homeowner, not only did he provide a tremendous item of value, not only did he get into a conversation with them, so they're kind of on a first name basis now, but he showed that he was an expert at their house. Do you think that makes an impression? You bet it did. The first year he did this, he got one listing out of the 300 houses, okay, and helped one buyer buy a house in there. Now, let me ask you this. How many opportunities are there in a 300 house neighborhood? On average, national statistics say that 10% of all the houses in a neighborhood will sell. So in a neighborhood of 300 houses, you have 30 listings. And there's 2 opportunities on each listing to be a realtor, right? Buying side, selling side. Okay? So there's actually 60 opportunities every year for Chad Gibbler to help somebody buy a house in that neighborhood or help somebody sell one. So the first year, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, he only did 2 this first year. He did, but hold on. He did 2 the first year, 1 listing and 1 buyer. The next year, he had gotten to all the people at least twice by that time. He got 9 listings in that neighborhood. 9. Now you're saying, well, wait a minute, Wellington, that's only 1/3. You're right. Not bad. 1/3 of all the listings in a neighborhood going to one guy. He is definitely now seen as the expert when it comes to real estate in that neighborhood, and that's what you want to do too. So let's talk about this. Here are the cons. The cons to this kind of door knocking is it's cost intensive. These are not cheap. They range anywhere from about $3 to $5 each. So you are making an investment. So you want to make sure you consider that first. Next, labor intensive. If you want to save money, you can actually make these up yourself. I know there are companies out there that will do this for you, but if you want to save money, you can make this up yourself, which makes it very, very labor intensive, but you will save money. Next, it's time consuming because you're going to have to get the little labels and the little card holders and the stuff that goes in the bag, and this takes some time to create. However, the pros is that is a huge impression. When you hand that to a homeowner, especially somebody who lives in a very expensive house, like $750,000 to $1.5 million, that makes an impression. Long-term kept. That wine opener is going to go in their drawer and stay there for years. So they're going to see your name on a regular basis. And it has a very upper crust image. It gives not only Rob Myers, but Chad Gibbler, people have the impression that they are the upper crust realtor. And that's what you want if you're going to work that kind of neighborhood. So there's the cons and the pros to doing this kind of door knocking. Okay, let's keep going here. Let's talk about shifting gears a little bit here. I'm going to tell you about a brand new technique that we have here at the Career Compass. It's the simplest thing that you'll ever do. But we call it the ultimate attention getter. Now, what's the ultimate attention getter? Well, let me ask you a quick question. In California, do you know what Prop 13 is? Now, some of you are like, well, of course I know what Prop 13 is. But many of you are like, I don't know. Which is kind of sad, actually, because tell you what, Prop 13 is one of the most important pieces of legislation ever in the state of California that affects home prices and home sales. So let's go over what Prop 13 is exactly. Proposition 13, officially named the People's Initiative to Limit Property Taxation, was an amendment of the Constitution of California enacted during 1978 by means of initiative process. It was approved by California voters June 6th of 1978. Proposition 13 is embodied in Article 13A of the Constitution of the State of California. Okay, so I'll give you a little background on what it is. The most significant portion of the Act is the first paragraph, which limited the tax rate for real estate. Section 1A, the maximum amount of any ad valorem tax on real property shall not exceed 1% of the full cash value of such property. Keep that in mind. The 1% tax to be collected by the counties and apportioned according to law to the districts within the county. Okay, so there you go. There's Prop 13. What is it saying? It's basically saying when a house is sold or purchased, or a new build, the base tax, before all the other local taxes and initiatives, the base tax is 1% of the value of the house when it's sold. Most of you know this. The proposition decreased property taxes by assessing property values at their 1975 value and restricted annual increases of assessed value of real property to an inflation factor not to exceed 2%. So they can only raise the taxes, what this is saying, they can only raise the taxes 2% per year or less based on inflation. Keep that in mind too, because that's important. It also prohibits reassessment of a new base year value except for a change in ownership or completion of new construction. So let me just explain what this means. Let me give you an example. If we bought a $100,000 house, now I know many of you out there are like, well, there's no such thing as a $100,000 house in California. I know. So if you live in Beverly Hills, then it's a $1 million house. But to make the numbers easy, let's say that you just purchased a $100,000 piece of property. What is the tax, the base tax of that property for the counties? 1%. So 1% of $100,000 is $1,000. So in other words, our base value tax is 1% or $1,000. They cannot move that tax up by any more than 2% per year or less. So let me give you an example again. We have a $100,000 house. Let's say that we keep it for 1 year. The house goes in value. If I wanted to sell the house in 1 year, it goes from $100,000 to $110,000. Let's just say we are in an increasing environment here. Okay, our market is increasing. So in 1 year, I now could sell my house for $110,000. Do I have to pay taxes this following year on 110? No, because the law says that they can only move the taxes up by 2% per year or less based on inflation. So let's say that inflation is more than 2%. Then they can only move my taxes up by 2%. So my new base is only 102% of the base. So they only moved up 2%. They can only move my taxes up to 2% more of the original $1,000. I'm hoping that's clear. So they can only move my taxes up by 2%, not the 10% that the value of the house went up. Okay. So let's say that I own my house for 20 years. And now the house is worth $200,000. Over 20 years, the house value doubled over that time period. Okay. What is our taxes? Well, they can only move the taxes up 2% each year compounded. So 20 years of 2% compounding comes out to what? Probably around about 1.4. Okay? If you compound 2% for 20 years, it probably comes out to about 1.456 or something to that effect. Somewhere in the 1.4 range, because it can only go up by 2% a year compounded. But my house is worth $200,000. But I only have to pay taxes on the 2% increase every year. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Now, here's what we're going to be doing. Before we get into our property tax reduction initiative, what this is going to do is this technique is now going to allow you to become the perceived expert when it comes to real estate in your hunting area. How are we going to do this? Before we get into this, I want to talk about Prop 8. And the Prop 8, what Prop 8 is actually an addendum to the base Prop 13. You can look this up on the State of California website if you like. Prop 8 simply is an addendum that addresses when home prices are decreasing or going down in value. And are we in that situation right now? Well, hopefully we're coming out of it at this point at the end of 2012. But we still, for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been in a decreasing value market. So a lot of people have seen decreases in the value of their homes, and that's where Prop 8, which is an addendum to Prop 13, comes into play. And what does it say? Here's what it says. Prop 8 allows the tax assessor, the county tax assessor, to lower the base value of the home each year. And if you're a homeowner, you're probably familiar with this because each year you get a new assessed value of your home. If it goes down, it can go down to the current value that they've assessed it for. Or, if it's an appreciating market, it can only go up by 2%. So we already went over that. So in other words, what Prop 8 does, it allows our home to be reassessed lower. So let's go back to our example. Let's say that I hold the house for 20 years. And now the house is worth, how much? $200,000. What is my tax base? Probably about 140 or 140% of the base, okay? Because it went up by 2% every year. Let's say we now enter into a decreasing market, and 2 years later my house has gone from $200,000 in value to $160,000. Question for you, can I ask for a tax reduction based on that? Many of you are like, of course I can. The answer is actually no. Here's why. Because my house is worth $160 now because it went down in value, but my tax base is still only $140. So my value is still above what my tax base is, so I will not be granted a reduction in taxes. Now, let's say that we have a severe declining market. Instead of it going from $200,000 to $160,000, it goes from $200,000 to $120,000. So now my value is $120,000, but my tax base is $140,000. Can I now ask for a tax reduction? Yes, I can, because now the value of my house is lower than the tax base. In fact, the county assessor should be doing this for you, but do yourself a favor, don't count on the county to make this happen every single time. You need to manage your own property taxes, and that's how we do this technique. So here's what we're going to do. Property tax reduction initiative. You're going to pick a hunting area where you're going to door knock. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to introduce to that area a property tax reduction initiative. You're going to incorporate this into your door knocking. You're going to create not flyers, not some flashy thing that creates a situation where, oh, please buy with me and I'm a great realtor. No, no, no. You're going to create something that looks like a notice, like we are being notified. Okay? Notice of flyers, not flyers. Okay? Specific time range. Here's your specific time range, and we all know property taxes come out about when? Around the October time period, exactly. Okay? You are the contact on this notice for more information regarding the property tax reduction initiative. Brief description of the program and the steps on the notice, where step 1 is to contact you. Let's go over this. Here is the piece of paper that we suggest you use. Yellow is a very official looking color. So instead of just using white, and don't use anything flashy, don't have your logo up here or anything else like that, just a blank off yellow piece of paper. Neighborhood notice. What does that mean? That just simply means that you are notifying the neighborhood that we're going to have a property tax reduction initiative. That goes right at the top of your sheet. Okay? So neighborhood notice. You're being notified. That's all it means. Property tax reduction initiative. Next, you can legally reduce your property taxes, okay, with a value reduction report. A value reduction report. That sounds familiar. Can you give me another example of something that's a value reduction report? Yeah, a CMA. Okay, that's all this is. Basically, a value reduction report is nothing more than a CMA that you're going to provide to anybody that wants one, and you do that for free for anybody that asked you in the first place, wouldn't you? If you're a realtor, you'd probably say yes to that. Okay, we're going to put that right there. Next, here are the steps. Number 1, contact ABC Real Estate. Who's ABC Real Estate? You are. Okay? ABC Real Estate at 2012 Low Tax Street, Irvine, California. Low Tax Street. Love that. So there's your address and your information. Request a property value reduction report. Just a CMA. Okay? And there is no cost for this because you are not going to be charging for these CMAs like you normally would. Present the report to the county assessor's office. So basically, if the owner feels that the county assessor has assessed their value too high, you now are going to be giving them information that they can take to the county assessor and show them, look, Mr. County Assessor, my house is actually worth less than you assessed it, so I should get an even further tax reduction than what you gave me. Key point. Taxable value of your home is temporarily reduced based on Article 13. There it is, Prop 13. So Prop 8 of Article 13, amendment reduction, thus taxes are lowered. Okay? So there's your Prop 8, which is nothing more than an addendum to Prop 13. You're going to put that right there. There is your entire flyer right there. You're going to put that people's doors or anywhere you would normally door knock. You're going to hand it to them when they answer the door or leave it for them for all the houses that you've targeted in your hunting area. Now, let's go over the notes here. Let's go over the notes. Here's the key point. The key point is you are not responsible for taking that CMA or property reduction report down to the county and getting their taxes reduced. That's not your job, and you shouldn't be doing that. You are simply offering them the opportunity to get that information from you so they can do that. Key point. So you are not responsible for contesting their assessed value. Number 2, you only provide them with the comps and other information in the property reduction report or CMA so they can do that for themselves. Okay? What else? If you're going to be coming to the Career Compass Seminar, we're actually going to give you some very general information about this, but what you need to do is make sure you consult all the government websites and the California websites as far as being able to do this correctly, because you do need to know what you're talking about when somebody calls you in regard to this. So keep that in mind, please. Okay? Now, here's a question for you. You're going to go ahead and distribute these flyers, these notices, around the 300, 400, 500 houses that you've targeted for your door knocking, right? Would you, question for you, would you present this idea to the HOA? Some of you are like, oh no, I would never do that. And some of you are like, yes, you would. You absolutely would. Here's why. You're going to go to the HOA and say, Mr. HOA President, Board, HOA Board, I would like to have a neighborhood property tax reduction initiative for this neighborhood. Now, you're going to explain how it works. Many of them may say, oh, this sounds like a headache and I don't want to do it and I don't want to endorse this, but they'll never say no to you. Here's why. Can you imagine owning a home in a neighborhood and finding out that the HOA president said no to a property tax reduction initiative? It'd be political suicide. So most HOAs are going to say, that sounds great. Even if they don't want to do it, they'll still let you do it. So what you say is fantastic. When's your next general meeting? You present this at the general meeting to all the homeowners that came to the general meeting. Now you have the HOA endorsement on your flyers. You can put right here, HOA endorsed. Then you go and distribute all the flyers, notices, to all the houses that you've identified. Creates a tremendous amount of credibility on your part. Okay? Now, the way you approach this is key. Here's the question for you. Do you want to be the realtor that has the flashy door hangers and the football schedules at the local high school? Or do you want to be the realtor that's considered by all the people in the neighborhood to be the expert when it comes to real estate? Which of those two do you want to be? Because there's dozens of realtors in any neighborhood that have the flashy flyers and the door hangers and the football schedule at the local high school and any of that kind of stuff. And that's fine, and that might generate some business. But what you want to be is this. You want to be thought of, perceived as the expert when it comes to real estate in that neighborhood. So anytime the neighbors are talking about, oh, you know, this is happening or that's happening, I might want to sell my house or buy a house, the first thing that happens is, oh, you've got to call so-and-so, you, because they really know what's going on in this neighborhood, because this flyer does more for you than just get your phone ringing. It does that too. But it creates an image for you in the neighborhood. The image that you are creating is that you are the expert when it comes to real estate, because you have the HOA's endorsement on a very, very touchy subject, taxes. And everybody's interested in taxes because everybody wants to pay the least amount of taxes that they can. So what this technique does is this creates your image as a realtor, as the expert as a realtor within that neighborhood. Okay? So what we're going to do is you're going to take the cold calling that we talked about previously with the door knocking techniques that we talked about here and combine them. You're going to door knock where you've cold called. So not only are they going to hear from you by phone, but they're also going to see your name again when you do things like this, or the salt, or the wine openers, or anything else like that. So take your cold calling and your door knocking and combine them into one area, creating that familiarity that you're going to have now over every other realtor in town. And people are going to think of you automatically when they want to buy, sell, or anything else like that. Good luck, and go get them.